The rain in North Harbor doesn't just fall, it attacks. It comes in sideways, smelling of salt and old iron, trying to drive the city back into the sea. It was late, maybe 11:30 at night, and the Harbor Light Cafe was empty save for me. Mara Quinn, the shy waitress, the girl who rehearsed coffee orders in her head so she wouldn't stutter. From my post behind the counter, the port lights were a sick, greasy yellow, smeared across the black water of the terminal. The ferry had made its last run hours ago. The only sounds were the buzz of the neon open sign and the relentless drumming of the storm. I was wiping down the espresso machine for the third time, counting the minutes until my midnight shift ended, when the night ripped apart. It wasn't a bang. It was a metallic scream. Tires first, howling in protest, followed by the sickening crunch of metal collapsing. I ducked, pure reflex, my heart leaping into my throat. When I peeked over the counter, I saw it. A black SUV, sleek and expensive, had annihilated the divider at the ferry drop-off. Its front end was a ruin, steam hissing into the rain. But it wasn't an accident. Even as I watched, another dark sedan slid to a stop 50 yards behind it. This wasn't a fender bender. This was a hunt. The passenger door of the wrecked SUV was kicked open. A man fell out. A mountain of a man, moving with a heavy, pained grace. He staggered to his feet, one hand clamped to his side. His shirt was dark, but the rain plastered it to his skin, revealing a deeper stain. Something thick, something that wasn't rainwater, ran between his fingers. The wind shifted, bringing the smell, salt, rain, and something else, something acrid and sharp, gunpowder. My legs turned to water. My first thought, my only thought, was the ice machine. It was old, loud, and solid steel. I scrambled behind it, curling into a ball, my cheap apron catching on the rusty leg. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying, please don't see me, please just go. But I heard him. A low groan, cut short, a sound of agony. I'm not a hero. I'm the girl who apologizes when a customer bumps into me. But that sound, it cut through the fear. It was the sound my mom made, right before the end. It was the sound of someone trying to hold on. My nursing school dropout instincts, the ones I'd buried under 5 years of diner aprons, screamed louder than my fear. Before I could stop myself, I was moving. I ran out the front door, the rain hitting me like a fist. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice sounding thin and stupid. He was on one knee, trying to leverage himself up against a concrete planter. He turned his head. Even in the gloom, I knew the face. You don't work the harbor for this long and not know the face. Dario Vassallo, the man whose name was only ever whispered, the head of the Vassallo Group, the ghost who owned the docks, the unions, the cargo, and the shadows in between. He looked at me, his eyes dark and assessing. Even now, he didn't see a savior. He saw a complication. Then the night hissed. Fut! 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 It wasn't the loud crack of a gun. It was a quiet, muffled spitting. Suppressors. The men from the sedan were advancing, moving like professionals. A chip of concrete exploded from the planter next to Dario's head. Another foot, the glass window of the Harbor Light Cafe, the one I just wiped down, shattered, raining down behind me. Dario roared, a low, animal sound, and tried to reach inside his jacket. His hand was shaking. He wasn't going to make it. I didn't think. I grabbed the front of his $1,000 suit jacket. Get up. You have to get up. He was impossibly heavy, all muscle and dead weight, but the adrenaline surging through me was electric. I hauled him backward, dragging him through the shattered doorway of the cafe, past the overturned tables. He was half walking, half leaning on me, leaving a dark trail on the linoleum. "The back," I gasped. "There's a fire escape." We burst through the kitchen's swinging doors, past the cooling racks and the walk-in freezer. I shoved the steel bar on the emergency exit, and we spilled out into the narrow alleyway, collapsing against the wet brick. The alley was a canyon of steel ladders and overflowing dumpsters. Dario slumped against the wall, breathing in ragged gasps. He was bleeding badly. I could see the wound now, a dark hole in his side, just above his belt. I was fumbling for my phone, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't get it out of my apron pocket. Who do I call the police? That seemed like a death sentence for both of us. Dario wasn't reaching for a phone. He'd pulled a small, rugged walkie-talkie from his belt. He thumbed the button. I braced myself. I expected him to threaten me, to tell me I saw nothing, to put a gun to my head. His voice was gravel, barely a whisper, but it cut through the storm. "Stop!" A pause. The foot sounds outside the alley entrance hesitated. He was looking right at me. His gaze was so intense it burned. "The girl," he rasped into the radio. "The waitress, Harbor Light. She's with me. Anyone touches her, they answer to me. Stand down, all of you. Stand down now." The command was absolute, and the result was immediate. Silence. The gunfire stopped. The hunting footsteps vanished. All I could hear was the rain, the distant foghorn, and my own heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. He had just given a ceasefire order for the entire dockside, for me. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice finally working. "They'll be back, or others will." He nodded, grimacing. "Up." I looked where he pointed, a rusty technical ladder, bolted to the brick, leading to the flat roof of the ferry terminal. "You can't climb that." "Don't have a choice," and he grunted. He went first, and I stayed right beneath him. Half pushing, half supporting his weight, every rung was an agony for him. I could hear the wet catch in his breath. By the time we rolled onto the flat tar roof, he was chalk white. We were exposed. The rain was colder up here, the wind trying to peel us from the roof. "The wound," I said, dropping into the nurse mode I never earned. "It's bad. I need to stop the bleeding." He just nodded, his jaw tight. "Your belt." He didn't ask why, and he just unbuckled the heavy leather belt and handed it to me. I ripped off my apron, folded it into a thick pad, and pressed it hard against the hole in his side. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, but didn't move. I looped the belt around his torso, threw the buckle, and pulled. I pulled with all my weight, cinching it as tight as I could, locking the belt's prong into a new hole, a crude pressure bandage. It would have to do. He slumped against a massive, humming air conditioning unit. He tried to pull his phone. The screen was a spiderweb of shattered glass. Useless. "They'll be looking," he whispered. "My people. And theirs." I might have a way. I ran to the edge of the roof, to the maintenance shed. The door was locked with a simple padlock. I found a loose piece of rebar and smashed the lock. Inside, among mops and buckets, was the cafe's old backup pager system. It was ancient, something the kitchen manager kept just in case. My dad was a sailor, and he spent more time on the water than on land. He didn't teach me how to bake or ride a bike. He taught me how to tie knots and how to read signal lights. I powered the pager. The small screen glowed. It still had a signal. I didn't key in 911. I keyed in an old harbor code, a signal known only to the longshoremen and the tugboat captains, a code for an emergency at the terminal, one that bypassed all official channels. The foghorn blasted, so close it vibrated in my teeth. When I turned back, Dario's eyes were closed. His head was lolled back against the humming metal. For a terrible second, I thought he was gone. But as I got closer, I saw his eyes were open, just a slit. He wasn't unconscious. He was conserving energy. He was watching a predator, even while bleeding out. A sound, a scrape, not from the ladder we used, from the other side of the roof. A shadow detached itself from a ventilation shaft. This man was different. He wore dark overalls like a city worker. He moved quietly, professionally. He wasn't one of Dario's. This was a cleaner, a man from the North Harbor Union, Vassallo's biggest rivals. He was here to finish the job. He saw us. He saw Dario slumped against the unit, and me, frozen beside him. He raised a pistol, small and dark, a suppressor on the end. There was no time to scream, no time to run. To my left, bolted to the maintenance shed, was a fire extinguisher, the big red kind. I didn't think. I acted. I ripped the extinguisher from its mount. The pin was already gone, and aimed the nozzle. I squeezed the handle. A thick, blinding cloud of white chemical foam erupted. It hit the man square in the chest. He choked, sputtering, instantly blind. The wind caught the cloud and whipped it into a disorienting fog. I didn't stop there. I ran at him, screaming, using the heavy metal canister as a battering ram. He was still trying to wipe the foam from his eyes when I brought my right elbow up, hard, and drove it straight into his throat. There was a sickening, wet crunch. He didn't make a sound. He just folded. He dropped his weapon and crumpled to the tar, motionless. My knees gave out. I fell, gasping. The white foam was everywhere, dissolving in the rain, stinging my eyes. I looked at my hands. They were steady, rock solid. My God, I just did that. In here, Dario's voice was weak, but it pulled me back. He was pointing to a small, windowless structure at the far edge of the roof, the old, abandoned beacon housing. It smelled like rust, ozone, and seagull droppings. I grabbed Dario's arm, pulling him. Come on, one more time. I dragged him inside the small metal room and shoved the rusted steel bar across the door. It was flimsy, but it was something. I collapsed onto the floor, my back against the vibrating metal wall. My heart was a wild bird in a cage. My apron was soaked, stained with his blood and fire extinguisher foam. I realized, dimly, that high above us, mounted on a pole overlooking the entire harbor, a small blue light was blinking. A security camera, one I'd never noticed before. It panned slowly, mechanically, capturing the fog, the rain, the empty roof, and the little metal room where we were hiding. Somewhere, in a sterile, dry office. Someone was watching. Someone from the Metropolitan Security Commission, the silent federal agency that watched the watchers. They saw it all. In the suffocating dark of the beacon room, I could hear Dario's breathing. It was shallow. Too shallow. "Don't die," I whispered, the words tasting like metal. "You can't die." He coughed, a dry, painful sound. "Wasn't planning on it," he rasped. "Not today." A strange, terrifying alliance settled between us, a promise made without words, sealed in gunpowder and rain. Lightning flashed, a brilliant white sheet, illuminating the tiny space for a single, stark second. It lit his face, tight with pain, and it lit mine. I saw the look in my own reflection in a sliver of broken glass. The fear was gone. The timid waitress who refilled coffee cups was gone. In her place was someone else, someone who had just chosen a side. And I had just chosen to stand with the most dangerous man in Baltimore. The weight in that steel box was the loudest silence I've ever known. Every drip of rain, every distant clang of a buoy sounded like a gunshot. Dario hadn't moved. He just sat, his back against the vibrating wall, that makeshift tourniquet holding his life in. My pager signal had gone out, a tiny, desperate prayer into the digital ether. After maybe 20 minutes, a low rumble, different from the storm, came from the water. A tugboat, not a speedboat, materialized from the rain. It slid up to the terminal, dark, its running lights off. One man was on deck. He looked up, saw nothing, and flashed a small penlight. Once, twice. "He's mine," Dario rasped. Getting him down that wet ladder was hell. He bore the pain with a silence that was more frightening than a scream. I went first, guiding his feet onto the rungs. The man from the boat, an old-timer with a face like worn leather, met us at the bottom. He didn't ask questions. He just took one of Dario's arms. I took the other, and we hauled him into my beat-up sedan, parked 3 blocks away. "Where to?" the old man asked. "My place. 14 Fleet Alley." I said, "I'll take it from here." The old man looked at Dario. Dario gave the slightest nod. The man melted back into the shadows of the dock. "Number 14. Fleet Alley isn't much. It's a red brick walk-up, wedged between a pawn shop and a bar that opens at 6 in the morning. My apartment is the attic. 4 flights up. Those stairs almost finished him. By the time I got the door unlocked, he was leaning his full weight on me, leaving a damp, dark smear on my apartment wall. I kicked the door shut, Barnacles, my geriatric ginger cat, hissed once from his throne on the armchair, decided the intruder was too much effort, and went back to sleep. My home? It's one room. Slanted ceilings, smelling of my two addictions, cheap ground coffee and iodine. The iodine was from the first aid kit I kept under the sink. "The sofa?" I ordered. He collapsed onto the worn, floral print cushions. I cranked the heat, then went to the kitchen sink, my hands finally starting to shake. I scrubbed the grime and chemical foam off my skin, watching the water turn gray. When I turned back, he was watching me. "That belt won't hold," I said, my voice sounding hollow in the small room. I have to look at it." He just nodded, his jaw set. I grabbed the scissors from my utility drawer. "This is ruined." I slid the scissors under the fabric of his shirt, the expensive cotton already stiffening. I cut it away, trying not to jostle him. The wound was ugly, a neat, round hole in his side, dark and angry. The belt had slowed the bleeding, but it was still seeping. I pulled out my old kit. It wasn't the cheap plastic kind. It was my nursing school kit, the one I'd kept in my closet for 5 years. A monument to a life I'd almost had. "You're lucky," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "It looks clean. Went straight through. Missed the vitals, I think, but it's deep." I cleaned it with antiseptic. He sucked in a breath through his teeth, his whole body tensing, but he never made a sound. His control was terrifying. "You've done this before," he stated. "It wasn't a question." "I was 2 semesters short of my RN," I said, my fingers automatically applying pressure, placing butterfly stitches to pull the skin together. "My mom got sick. Her medical debt well. Nursing school doesn't pay for itself, and neither does chemotherapy." I finished with a thick, sterile bandage, taping it down with a precision that felt foreign. My hands, which shook when I carried a tray of coffee, were rock steady as I patched up a mafia boss. He must have drifted off, the shock and blood loss finally claiming him. I covered him with the one clean quilt I owned and made a pot of coffee, my hands now shaking so badly I spilled grounds all over the counter. I sat in my only other chair, the wooden one from the kitchen, and just watched him, the most powerful man in the harbor. Helpless on my sofa, the rain finally softened against the attic window. I must have dozed, because the next thing I knew, the gray light of a false dawn was creeping in. And he was awake. His eyes weren't drowsy. They were sharp, alert, and tracking. He wasn't looking at me. He was scanning the room, the single door, the one window. "Where's the back door?" he asked. His voice was raw, but it was strong. Not, "Where am I not? Who sent them not? Why did you save me?" He was assessing my vulnerabilities. His first thought was my safety. That, more than anything, made my stomach twist. "There isn't one," I said, pointing with my coffee mug. "Just the fire escape. But the ladder's rusted out. It stops at the 2nd floor. It's useless." He nodded slowly, filing the information away. He started to move, pushing himself up on one elbow. He was reaching for his jacket, or what was left of it. "I'll pay you," he grunted. "No." The word was out before I could think. It hung in the air between us. He froze. This clearly was a transaction he didn't understand. "I don't want your money, Mr. Vassallo," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "You don't owe me for this. You owe me for that." I pointed toward the window, toward the harbor. "You kept me alive last night. Fine. In return, you keep my life alone. The harbor light, my customers, the other waitresses, you and your associates, you stay away. No trouble, no business. Ever. That's the price." He stared at me. His eyes, which had been hard and cold, softened with something I couldn't place. Confusion, maybe respect. He was a man who lived by leverage and payment, and I just offered him kindness with no angle. He relaxed, just slightly. "You have my word." Then he did something that shocked me. He reached inside his boot and pulled out a second phone, a slim, nondescript burner. He powered it on and dialed a single number. "It's me." A pause. He was listening. Yes, still breathing. I need you to activate a level 1 protection." He was looking right at me. "The name is Mara Quinn, M-A-R-A. Quinn, address is 14 Fleet Alley, attic apartment." He listened again. "I don't care what the protocol is. Do it, her, and the Harbor Light Cafe on the terminal. Effective immediately. And find out who moved on me. I want names." He clicked the phone off and tossed it on the coffee table. "Level 1 protection," he said, as if explaining something simple. "No one in my organization, or anyone who wants to be in my organization, can touch you, or the cafe. It's permanent." I was property, protected property. I wasn't sure if I should thank him or run. His burner phone buzzed, a text. He read it, and a dark, humorless smile touched his lips. "It seems," he said, "the North Harbor Union is spreading the word. Dario Vassallo is dead." "And the MSC?" I asked, remembering the camera. His smile faded. "They're looking for a woman in a yellow raincoat. That was you. Wasn't it the apron?" My blood went cold. He was still looking at me, his gaze fixed, not on my face, on my chest, on the cheap white button-down I wore under my apron. "Your pin," he said. I looked down. My name tag, Mara, a cheap piece of plastic. "No, the other one?" I'd forgotten. Clipped to my collar, a little enamel pin of a coffee cup, a 10-year employee gift. "May I?" he asked. He didn't grab, he asked. I nodded, my throat tight. He leaned forward, ignoring the pull on his stitches. His fingers, large and calloused, were surprisingly gentle as they brushed my collar. He unclipped the pin. He didn't look at it. He turned it over. With his thumbnail, he pried the backplate off the cheap metal. And there it was. A tiny black chip, smaller than a grain of rice. A little blue light, so small I'd never seen it, blinked steadily. "A tracker," he said. His voice was flat, deadly. "They didn't just find you last night. Mara, they've been watching you. They planted this on you at the cafe. They weren't just hunting me. They were using you as bait." The room tilted. All those nights, all those customers. Any one of them who? It doesn't matter. They knew I go to the Harbor Light. It's the only place it's neutral ground. Or it was. I felt sick. I'd been a walking target. I'd led them right to him. He held the pin between his thumb and forefinger. He looked at me. Not with anger, but with that same strange permission. "May I?" I nodded, unable to speak. He didn't crush it. He just dropped it into the half-full mug of coffee I'd left on the table. The blue light blinked twice and died. The adrenaline was long gone, leaving a hollow, aching exhaustion. I realized I was starving. "I have soup," I said, the word sounding ridiculous. I opened 2 cans of clam chowder and heated them on my hot plate. I handed him a bowl. We sat in silence. The only sound, the tink-tink of our spoons against the ceramic. "The pager code," he said, breaking the quiet. "The signal you sent, that wasn't 911. "No," I said, staring into my bowl. "It was my dad's old signal. He was a sailor, an independent, worked the tugs. He always said the harbor had its own rules, its own language. He taught me the light codes before he taught me how to drive." Dario stopped eating. He just listened. He seemed to be learning a foreign language, one he'd never heard. "A free man on the harbor," he said, testing the words. "A rare thing." As if summoned, my phone buzzed on the counter. It wasn't his burner, it was my phone. A text from an unknown number. "You're just bait." I showed it to him. His face hardened. He was instantly on his feet, the pain from his wound forgotten. "They're testing the perimeter. They know the tracker's dead. They know I'm here." He reached down, not to his belt, but to his right ankle. I hadn't even seen the holster. He pulled a small, flat, black pistol. It looked tiny in his hand. He held it out to me. "Grip first." I can't," I stammered. I've never... "It's simple," he said, his voice hard. "Safety's off. You point, you pull the trigger. If they come through that door," he nodded at my apartment door, "you shoot before you're scared. Mara. Hesitation is what gets you hurt." My hand closed around the grip. It was heavy. It was cold. It was the most terrible thing I'd ever touched. And then the new sound started. a low, rhythmic whump, whump, whump. It wasn't the rain, it was a helicopter. It was close. The windows of my attic apartment began to rattle. The water in my glass vibrated. Barnacles shot under the sofa like a ginger bullet. A light, brighter than 1,000 suns, blasted through the window. It erased all the shadows, turning my small, safe home into a black and white prison. MSC, Dario growled. He wasn't looking at the window. He was stalking across the room to the far wall, the one covered by an old, faded tapestry. He ripped the tapestry aside. Behind it was a rusted square grate. "Heating duct," he said. He kicked it. The rusted metal screamed and tore free. "It's an old building. This system connects the whole block. They won't know about it. Move." He shoved himself into the black, narrow space. "Your turn. Now." I scrambled in after him. The gun still gripped in my hand. The space was impossibly tight. It smelled of rust, dead air, and something sour. I was pressed right against his back. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the dampness of his sweat, the metallic tang of his blood. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I could hear him breathing, low and controlled, in front of me. He was wounded. He was hunted. He was trapped. And he was the calmest thing in this storm. He was pulling me forward, his large frame breaking the path. I realized, in that suffocating darkness, my breath mingling with his, that I wasn't saving him. He was saving me. We heard it from inside the duct, the heavy, splintering crash as they kicked in my apartment door. We crawled faster. We emerged onto the flat roof of the pawn shop, 3 buildings down, hidden behind a massive brick chimney. The helicopter was still circling my building, its light flashing uselessly through my empty window. The rain hadn't stopped. In the distance, a new wail joined the chorus. Not a siren, the old city flood alarms. The storm surge was coming. Dario leaned against the chimney, the effort finally catching up to him. The rain washed the grime from his face, and in the thin, watery light of dawn, I saw the exhaustion. The long night wasn't over. It was just changing shape. I didn't sleep in a bed. I woke up on a leather couch in a room that smelled like old cigars and lemon oil. It was a high-rise condo, maybe 30 floors up, with windows that looked out over a city that wasn't mine. Dario was gone. A new, clean set of clothes, jeans, and a black sweater. Not my style, but expensive, was folded on a chair. There was a bandage on my arm where I'd scraped it in the duct. Someone, one of his quiet, unseen people, had patched me up while I was asleep. The events of the last 12 hours felt like a fever dream. The gunfire, the ice machine, the rooftop, the man's throat collapsing under my elbow, the gun he'd given me, which was now conspicuously absent. I was a prisoner of his protection. But the panic clawing at my throat wasn't about Dario. It was about the cafe. It was Tuesday. I had the opening shift. It was insane. The entire city was probably looking for a woman in a yellow apron, and I was worried about being late for work. But the harbor light was the only piece of my life that still made sense. It was the only place I was Mara and not bait. I had to go. I took the service elevator down, my heart hammering. I walked the 20 blocks to the terminal, half expecting a hand to grab my shoulder, but the streets were just normal. People were getting coffee. The level 1 protection was an invisible shield I could feel but not see. Until I got there. The harbor light was dark, the neon sign was off, and plastered across the glass door, the one I dragged Dario through, was a massive, bright orange sticker. Federal Commerce Bureau, closed by order of Public Health and Safety. Violation pending hazard investigation. My legs went weak. I leaned against the cold ferry railing, the rain starting again, lighter this time. They hadn't just raided my apartment, they had erased my life, my job, my paycheck, my one tiny insignificant foothold in the world. It was gone. All the other waitresses, the cooks, I'd gotten them all fired. They moved fast. I didn't jump. I'd been expecting him. I turned. Dario was leaning against a piling, dressed in the dark blue, zip-up jumpsuit of a city electrician. He looked pale, and there was a stiffness to his movements that told me the stitches I'd put in were barely holding. But his eyes were sharp. They missed nothing. They closed us," I whispered, the word stupid. "A health violation. We're the cleanest cafe on the harbor." "It's not about health, Mara. It's about leverage. Look." A white utility van, no city logo, just a generic Harbor Electric sticker. Pulled up to the curb. 3 men in matching jumpsuits got out. They weren't carrying toolboxes. They were carrying pry bars and a heavy-duty bolt cutter. They were too big, their shoulders too broad. They headed straight for my cafe. "North Harbor Union," Dario said, his voice flat. "Posing as inspectors. They find a violation, condemn the building, and by the time we fight it in court, the place is already bulldozed." The men started working on the lock. I looked at Dario, panicked. "Aren't you going to do something?" "I already did." Dario stepped away from the piling and walked calmly toward them. He was holding a clipboard. "Morning, boys," he said. His voice was casual, but it cut right through the morning damp. The 3 men froze. They recognized him instantly. Even in the jumpsuit, there was no mistaking him. "Vassallo," the lead man spat, dropping his pry bar. "Heard you were retired." "The rumors were exaggerated," Dario said, holding up the clipboard. "But this, unfortunately, is very real. State Judge Riley's court, docket number 377. A temporary restraining order against any and all city, state or federal action against this property. Filed." He glanced at his watch. "About 35 minutes ago." The man's face went from smug to confused. "What, we're just checking them at the wiring." "According to this injunction, which has already been wired to the FCB and the Port Authority, you're trespassing," Dario said, his voice still light. "And my lawyers are very, very bored. They'd love to add you 3 to the harassment suit, by name." This was a language the union thugs didn't understand. They were built for breaking bones, not for depositions. They were looking for a gunfight, and Dario had brought a lawsuit. The leader stared at the paper, then at Dario, then back at his useless pry bar. He cursed, a low, vicious sound, and motioned to his men. "We're done here." They piled back into the van and sped off, their tires squealing. Dario didn't smile. He turned, not to me, but to 2 other men I hadn't even seen, who were suddenly just there. One was by the newsstand, the other by the ferry ramp. "This cafe," Dario said, loud enough for them to hear. "This block, a 200-meter radius. It's a safe zone. No business. No trouble. No one raises their voice. Anyone steps out of line, they'll wish they were dealing with the union. We clear." The men nodded and vanished. The harbor was back to normal, except it wasn't. The whispers started before lunch. The old-timers at the bait shop, the crane operators, the ferry captains. Vassallo isn't dead. He's back, and he's protecting a waitress. He faced down the union, unarmed, for a damn coffee shop. To some, it made him a legend. To others, it made him a fool. It made him look weak. And on the harbor, weakness is blood in the water. Dario handed me a small, heavy set of new keys. "They can't lock you out of a place you own the locks to." "This isn't a fight I can win. Dario," I said, my hands shaking as I took the keys. "They'll just come back." "They will," he agreed. "But not here. This was just the opening move. The real game is happening at City Hall." He was right. That same afternoon, the Port Development Committee held an emergency session. The Harbor Light Cafe, my little greasy spoon, was suddenly item number 1. They weren't talking about health codes. They were talking about urban blight and eminent domain. My cafe, the one piece of land not owned by the city, was holding up a $1 billion redevelopment plan. Dario didn't wait for the vote. He'd already made his next move. A freelance journalist, the kind of online blogger who lived to destroy politicians, received an anonymous data dump, scanned bank statements, offshore accounts, all linked to 2 members of the Port Committee. The money was coming from a shell company, the same one that held the lease for the North Harbor Union's headquarters. Dario had just declared war, not with bullets, but with spreadsheets. He came for me as I was sweeping up the shattered glass from the front window. The closed sign was gone, replaced by Dario's court order. "I need to show you why, Mara E.," he said. "Why a coffee shop? Why you?" We didn't take a fancy car. We took an old, beaten-up pickup truck, and he drove us away from the water, up into the hills overlooking the city. We parked at a rusted chain-link fence, overgrown with ivy. "Steve, Bridget's monastery, condemned. My grandfather helped build this place," he said, cutting the lock with a pair of bolt cutters from the truck bed. "Stone by stone. The city seized it from the church 50 years ago. I seized it back." We walked through the collapsed chapel. Pigeons scattered from the rafters. The air smelled like damp stone and mold. But behind the ruined altar, hidden by a heavy velvet curtain, was a steel door. He opened it with a key, and we stepped inside. The humming hit me first. The room was cold, where the choir used to sing. Rows and rows of black computer servers blinked with tiny, blue lights. Wires, thick as a man's arm, ran across the stone floor and up to a satellite dish I hadn't seen on the roof. "This," he said, "is the real harbor." He sat at a console. A bank of 12 monitors flickered to life. They showed shipping manifests, container tracking data, live bank transfers. "I don't just move cargo," he said. "I move information. I know what's in every box on every ship before it even leaves port. That's the real power." But he typed a command. A new screen popped up, a spreadsheet. "I have a leak, a big one." He showed me ghost containers, boxes of high-end electronics listed as scrap metal, boxes of pharmaceuticals listed as machine parts, millions of dollars siphoned off every week. "The money trail," he said, pointing, "leads here. The North Harbor Union. They're getting paid to look the other way, and paid again to sell the stolen goods. But they're not smart enough to set this up. Someone inside my own organization is feeding them the codes, clearing the shipments." "Who?" A man stepped out of the shadows from the back of the server room. He was the complete opposite of Dario. He was slender, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my apartment. He had a brilliant, friendly smile and a warm handshake. "Ansel Crow," he said, taking my hand. It was cold. "A pleasure, miss. Quinn, you've been a complication." "Ansel handles my legitimate businesses," Dario said, his eyes never leaving the screen. "The investments, the political donations." "Dario," Ansel said, his smile still fixed. "A public injunction, a data leak to a blogger. It's messy, it's loud. This isn't how we operate. We're businessmen, not brawlers." "And that's the problem," Dario said. He pointed to the screen. "This is the why. Mara, the port committee, the ones trying to steal your land. They're being paid by the same ghost fund that's paying the union. It's a two-front war. The union tries to break me in the street, and the politicians try to break me with the law." He looked at me, and the pieces clicked. A cold, sick-making certainty. "They needed me gone," he said. "And the MSC, the feds, they've been sniffing around my operation for a year. But they had nothing until you." "Me? You're the living witness. Mara, the only person who saw the attack, the gunfire, the whole thing. You're the one loose end. They didn't just want me dead. They wanted me discredited. And if I died, you'd be the star witness in the case that brought my whole organization down, pinning the violence on me. I was caught, not between two gangs. I was caught between Dario, his internal traitor, the North Harbor Union, and the federal government. I wasn't bait anymore. I was the fuse. I spent the next 2 days at the harbor light. The glass was replaced. The coffee machines were running. The staff came back, one by one, their fear replaced by a kind of defiant pride. We were the cafe that wouldn't die. It was the only thing that kept me sane. Wiping tables, pouring coffee, the simple, repetitive, normal tasks, that was my anchor. Dario found me there, long after close. I was sitting at the counter, just staring at the new, clean glass. "They're gonna come for me, aren't they?" I whispered. "The MSC, the union, this Ansel." "Yes," he said. He didn't lie. He never lied to me. He came behind the counter and sat on the stool next to me. He looked tired. The wound was pulling at him. "I can't promise you peace, Mara," he said, his voice so low I could barely hear him. "I can't promise you a quiet life. Not after this. It's too late for that." I closed my eyes. "But I promise you this," he said. I felt his hand, rough and calloused, cover mine on the counter. His touch was warm, solid. "I will stand between them and you, always." His promise. "I will stand between them and you," hung in the air of the cafe. But he didn't just mean at the cafe, he meant everywhere. That night, he didn't take me back to the high-rise. He took me back to the monastery. The main server room was cold, the constant hum of the machines a metallic drone in the vast, stone space. But Dario led me past the altar, through a small, arched doorway I hadn't noticed, into what must have been the old rectory. It was smaller, quieter. The only light came from a few thick pillar candles he'd lit, placed on a heavy oak table. They smelled of old wax and honey. The contrast was dizzying, a high-tech spy hub in one room, a medieval sanctuary in the next. "You need to change that dressing," I said. It was an order, not a request. My voice had a new kind of confidence when I was in nurse mode. He didn't argue. He sat on the edge of the ancient table, the candlelight playing over the hard lines of his face. He pulled the electrician's jumpsuit down to his waist, revealing the clean t-shirt he wore beneath. It was stuck to the tape I'd used. "This is gonna sting," I said. "It's not the first time." I got the new kit, a professional one. Not my old school supplies that he'd stashed here. I worked carefully, my fingers peeling back the medical tape. His skin was hot, not with fever, just with life, a vibrant, dangerous heat. The wound was raw. The stitches I'd put in were angry and red, but they were holding. He hadn't torn them. Not yet. "You've been active," I murmured, cleaning the edges with an antiseptic wipe. He just watched my hands. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. The silence in the room was so thick. All I could hear was the quiet sizzle of the wipe and my own breathing. I was so close to him, my shoulder almost brushing his chest. I could smell the antiseptic, the candle wax, and something else underneath. Just him. Clean, metallic. As I reached for the new bandage, my fingers brushed across his shoulder. There was a scar there. Not from a bullet. It was old. Silvery white in the candlelight, a jagged, ugly thing. Without thinking, I traced it with my fingertip. It was a stupid, intimate gesture. He tensed. I pulled my hand back. "Sorry. Ansel always says I should get that fixed," he said, his voice quiet. "Bad for the image." A small, involuntary smile touched my lips. What, the invincible Dario Vassallo? His eyes met mine. The hardness, the assessment, it was gone, replaced by something else, something tired and real. "The image is armor, Mara. Sometimes the armor gets heavy." "Sometimes," I said, my voice just as quiet. "It's okay to set it down." I focused on applying the new, sterile pad. My hands were steady, but my heart was a different story. "You know," he said, "when I gave that order, the stand down, for the whole harbor." I taped the corner of the bandage. "Yes, in the alley, after I pulled you out of the cafe." "No," he said. I stopped. I looked up. "Not in the alley," he said, his gaze holding mine, unblinking. "The second you ran out that door, the second I saw you in the rain, before the window broke, before you even touched me." My breath hitched. I just stared at him. I couldn't process it. The man who ran a criminal empire, who had just been shot, had used his one desperate chance, his one tactical move not to save himself, not to call for backup, but to protect a waitress he'd never even spoken to. You didn't even know me," I whispered. "I knew you," he said simply. "I've been coming to the harbor light for a year. You're the one who never spills, the one who remembers how I take my coffee. You're the one who you always look scared, but you're not weak. I saw you run at the gunfire. I wasn't going to let that be the end of your story." A single, hot tear escaped and ran down my cheek. I was too stunned to even wipe it away. "Why?" I asked, the words small and lost in the big, stone room. "Why me, Dario? Why save me?" His eyes searched my face. He seemed to be asking himself the same question. "I think," he said, his voice rough, "I need you to answer that for me. Why did you save me? You should have stayed behind the ice machine." I thought for a second. I thought about the fear. I thought about the sound he made. "Because," I said, my voice gaining strength, "nobody deserves to die alone in the rain." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes broke. A wall he'd kept up, it just crumbled. Slowly, as if testing the air. He raised his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused from things I didn't want to know about. He didn't grab me. He didn't demand. He just touched my cheek. His thumb brushed away the tear track. He left his hand there, hovering, a question, giving me the power, giving me the choice to pull away. I leaned into his touch. It was all the answer he needed. He moved in, and the world just stopped. The servers, the rain, the danger, all of it faded to a dull hum. His lips were not soft. They were firm, chapped, and desperate. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was a question and an answer and a prayer all in one. His other hand came up, burying itself in my hair, tilting my head. His grip was possessive, like a man drowning, holding on to his last breath. My hands, the ones I'd just used to bandage him, found their way to his chest. I could feel his heart. Vroom! A wild, frantic thunder against my palm, matching my own. He deepened the kiss, and I opened to him, a gasp escaping my throat that he swallowed. His heavy suit coat, the one he'd put on over the jumpsuit, slid from his shoulders and pooled on the floor with a heavy thud. It was the only sound. I felt a shiver, a deep, primal tremor run through him. Or maybe it was me. I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. His lips moved from my mouth, tracing a line of fire along my jaw to the sensitive skin beneath my ear. My breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. I clung to him, my fingers twisting in his shirt as the room, the stone, the candlelight, all blurred into a warm, spinning vertigo. It was too much. It wasn't enough. A long, long time later, there was silence. A warm, heavy silence. My head was resting on his good shoulder. His arms were wrapped around my waist, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I didn't care. I felt safe. It was the most ridiculous, insane feeling I'd ever had. He moved, just enough to press his forehead against mine. We stayed like that, just breathing each other's air. His eyes were closed. "From now on," he whispered, his voice thick, "I owe you a safe city." The weight of his words settled on me. A safe city. A promise a man like him could never keep, but would die trying to. I smiled, a small, sad smile against his skin. "I don't need a city," I said, my voice muffled. "I'd just settle for one morning where I can drink my coffee and not be afraid of the sound of a siren." He pulled back. The look on his face, it was raw. It was a vulnerability that scared me more than his power. He'd just been handed a request he actually understood. He let me go, and the cold of the room rushed back in. I shivered, instantly. He was pulling the heavy wool sweater he'd been wearing under the jumpsuit over his head. "Dario, no, your side." He ignored me, hissing as he pulled his arm through and draped the sweater over my shoulders. It was huge. It smelled like him. Better. He found an ancient plug-in coffee percolator in a cabinet. It looked like it was from the 1950s. We spent the next 10 minutes laughing, actually, truly laughing as it sputtered and hissed, refusing to brew. "The ghost who owns the docks," I teased. "Can't defeat a coffee pot." "It's got a union," he grumbled, hitting the side. He finally got it to work. The coffee was terrible. It was burnt and weak. We shared a single mug, passing it back and forth, sitting at the heavy oak table, and I watched the monster of the harbor, the man who had stopped the docks with a single word, drink bad coffee and smile about it. Later, as the first hint of gray light touched the stained glass windows, I saw his energy finally give out. The adrenaline was gone. His wound and the night had finally caught up. His eyelids grew heavy. "Go to sleep, Dario." "I don't," he started, the protest automatic. "Can't." "Yes, you can," I said. I stood up, took the empty mug, and gently pushed his shoulder. "I'll watch. I'll be the armor. Just for an hour. Go on." He looked at me, his gaze searching. He was weighing a lifetime of paranoia against one night of trust. He laid down on the hard, narrow cot in the corner, not even bothering to take off his boots. He was asleep in 30 seconds. I watched him. The man who never closed his eyes. The man who always watched the exits. He was completely vulnerable. He had lowered his armor. He had given his life, in that moment, into my hands. The sound of the distant tide bell, ringing in the harbor, floated up to our stone sanctuary. When he woke, 2 hours later, the sun was up. He didn't say anything. He just watched me as I poured myself a fresh, terrible cup of coffee. He reached into his pocket, not for a gun, not for a phone. He pulled out a small, worn leather cord. On it was a sliver of brass. It was curved, with markings. I realized it was a piece of something larger. "My father's," he said. "He was a navigator. On the old freighters. He said this was from his first compass, the one that always found its way home." He didn't ask. He just came up behind me and looped the cord over my head. The metal was cool against my skin, resting in the hollow of my throat. A promise. We will always find each other. I looked at him, my hand covering the small piece of metal. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't a fairy tale. Love, I was learning, didn't save you from your past. It just gave you a new, terrifying standard for your future. The quiet we found in the monastery didn't last. It couldn't. The harbor is a living thing, and it doesn't tolerate a vacuum. Dario's level 1 protection, his invisible shield, held the small-time thugs at bay. But the real players, the ones who didn't fear him, were moving. The chess game began not with a bang, but with smoke. I was at the harbor light, wiping down the new front window, when the smell of chemical fire rolled in with the morning fog from the cafe. I could see it, a pillar of greasy, black smoke rising from the north terminal, Warehouse 6, one of Dario's main holding areas. The news was all over it by 10 a.m. Suspected gang arson at Vassallo compound. Port Authority blames ongoing turf war. They were painting him as a warlord, losing control. I met him back at the monastery. I expected to find him strapping on a vest, sharpening knives instead. I found him, Ansel Crow, and 3 men in suits I didn't recognize. The men were lawyers. Ansel was pacing, his friendly face tight with irritation. "Dario, you have to hit back. This is a public challenge. They burn 1 of ours, we burn 2 of theirs. This is how the game is played. This inaction makes you look weak." Dario, who was studying a shipping chart, didn't even look up. No, Ansel scoffed. "They want me to be a thug," Dario said, his voice calm. "They need me to be a thug. It's the only way the politicians can justify seizing my leases." He looked at his lead lawyer. "File it now." "File what?" I asked. Dario finally looked at me, a tiny, cold smile on his lips. "The North Harbor Union burns my warehouse. So, I am filing a public records request for every email, text message, and memo sent between the Port Development Committee and the mayor's office for the last 6 months. They want a war fine. We'll fight it with discovery motions." It was brilliant. Within 24 hours, the headlines changed. The story was no longer gang fire at port. It was Vassallo Group alleges City Hall collusion. The public, who already hated the city council, started asking what the politicians were hiding. He'd changed the narrative. He'd refused to be the monster they needed him to be. While he fought the city, I became something new. I wasn't just Mara, the shy waitress. I was the harbor light girl, the one Dario Vassallo had put the entire port on pause for. I was a curiosity, and then I became a symbol. It was a Thursday afternoon. Old Salty Mike, a regular who'd been drinking his lunch at the bar down the street, was stumbling along the pier. He tripped on a cleat and went straight over the edge, into the cold, murky water. I didn't even think. I heard the splash, dropped the crate of milk I was carrying, and ran. I kicked off my shoes and jumped in after him. The water was shocking, so cold it stole my breath. Mike was sputtering, his heavy jacket pulling him under. I got behind him, hooked my arm under his chin the way they'd taught us in that one. Useless water safety class in nursing school, and screamed for a rope. 2 longshoremen pulled us out. Mike was blue, but I rolled him onto his side and pressed on his back until he coughed up a lungful of dirty harbor water. I was soaked, shivering, and covered in grime. I thought nothing of it, but someone had filmed it on their phone. By that night, the clip was on every local blog. Harbor Light hero, waitress saves fisherman. In a port defined by violence and backroom deals, a simple act of kindness was revolutionary. I had, entirely by accident, become the human face of Dario's safe zone. I was the proof that his new way worked. It also put a much, much bigger target on my back. The pressure was getting to his inner circle. I was in the server room. Organizing files, Dario had started teaching me how to read the manifests when Ansel Crow came in. He thought we were alone. "Dario, this is untenable," Ansel said, his voice low and urgent. "You're fighting a legal battle, a PR battle, and a street war, all at once. You're bleeding. The fire cost us $5 million. Easy." "We'll manage," Dario said, not looking up from the monitor. "This isn't managing, this is ego." Ansel motioned toward me. "Look, let's be smart. The union wants the North Docks. Let them have it. It's a losing asset anyway." "I'm not ceding territory, Ansel." "Then disappear." Ansel's voice was sharp. "Take 6 months. Go to Sicily. Take her." He smiled at me, a bright, empty smile. "Let the heat die down. Let the union think they've won. Peace for profit. We consolidate. We come back stronger. It's the smart play." Dario stood up. He was taller than Ansel, and in that cold, server-lit room, he seemed to suck all the air out. "Peace, you call that a toll. Do you know what they do at the North Docks, Ansel? They tax the workers, 20% of their pay just to get a shift. They shake down the families. I am not feeding my people to those animals." Ansel's smile vanished. "They're just workers, Dario." "They're my workers," Dario shot back. "This isn't about profit anymore. It's about a clean port." Ansel looked at me, his eyes suddenly cold. He saw it. He saw my influence. I wasn't just a complication. I was the one who was changing the rules. "Since when?" he said. "Does the wolf care about the sheep?" "Since the wolf realized the shepherds were the real problem," Dario replied. Ansel left. The silence he left behind was heavy. The divide in Dario's house was no longer a secret. The federal government, the MSC, made their next move, not with a helicopter, but with a muffin. I was back at my old apartment, number 14 Fleet Alley. The door was new, the frame repaired. Dario had insisted I get barnacles. I couldn't leave my cat in a war zone. I was just putting him in his carrier when someone knocked. It was a woman, maybe in her early 30s. She was wearing yoga pants and a university sweatshirt. She was holding a paper bag. "Hi," she said, a bright, neighborly smile. "I'm Yarafeld. I just moved in downstairs. 2B. I know it's a mess with all the, repairs, but I figured I'd say hello. Brought you a blueberry muffin." My blood ran cold. 2B had been empty for a year. "Oh," I said, forcing a smile. "Thank you. I'm Mara. I was just on my way out." "This whole building is crazy." "Right," she said, leaning against the door frame. "All casual. I heard what happened. That must have been terrifying. The raid. I'm a paralegal. Downtown, I see this stuff sometimes. This guy, Vassallo, seems like a lot. Bad news. Right." "He's complicated," I said, holding the cat carrier. Yara's smile softened, became conspiratorial. "Honey, listen, I get it. A guy like that, powerful, dangerous, it's attractive. But they're black holes. A man like that, he's just going to pull you down. You're just a liability to him, a loose end. You should be careful." The old Mara, the girl behind the ice machine, would have stammered and agreed. I stood up straight. My hand, instinctively, went to the brass compass piece hidden under my shirt. "He didn't pull me down," I said, my voice quiet but hard. "He was the one who pulled me up." Yara's friendly neighbor mask flickered. Her eyes went sharp. The smile tightened. "Right, well, just be careful." She handed me the muffin. "See you around." I watched her walk down the hall. I looked at her feet. Practical. Black athletic shoes, worn at the heel. Standard issue. She wasn't a paralegal. She was MSC. And she was in my building. The next move came from Dario's side, or from inside his side. He called me to the monastery. I ran the 4 blocks, my heart in my throat. When I got to the server room, his face was pale. "What is it? What's wrong?" "A ghost shipment," he said, his voice tight. "A big one. 20 containers, high-end military optics, just past the outer breakwater, bypassed all my alerts, all my flags." "How?" He pointed to the monitor, to the digital log. "They didn't use my codes. They used yours." I stared. There, on the screen, in the authorization column, was a string of characters. 113, pause, 21. My dad's old code, the emergency signal I had sent from the pager, the one I used on the roof. "How?" I whispered. "How is that possible?" "Only 2 people on Earth knew that code. Mara, you, and me." He looked at me, not with suspicion, but with a terrible, dawning certainty, which means someone was listening, someone inside my organization, someone with access to my personal comms logs from that night. The list was small. "Ansel," I said. "It's not just him," Dario said, shaking his head. "The list of people with that level of access, it's 3 names long, and Ansel Crow is one of them. Someone is using your signature. Mara. They are framing you, or using you, to move the very cargo I'm trying to stop." The North Harbor Union, however, didn't play chess. They preferred checkers, with sledgehammers. I arrived at the harbor light the next morning. It was propped against the front door. A massive, ostentatious funeral wreath, white carnations and lilies, the kind they use for gangsters. It was so big it blocked the entrance. The card was simple, black border. "Our deepest condolences. Mara, we're sorry for your loss. The North Harbor Union." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. They were telling me I was already dead. I didn't panic. I just got cold. I called Dario. He was there in 10 minutes. He didn't come in his electrician's jumpsuit. He came in one of his $1,000 suits. He looked at the wreath, his face absolutely still. Then he took out his phone, and he didn't call his soldiers. He made 3 calls. The first was to the head of the Tugboat Pilots Association, the second to the head of the Longshoremen's Locale, the third to the chief crane operator. His voice was quiet, but it was the voice from the alley, the voice of pure command. "This is Vassalo, the Harbor Light Cafe. Effective immediately, any captain, any pilot, any crew that services a vessel any vessel owned, leased or contracted by the North Harbor Union or any of their 24 shell companies loses their docking privileges indefinitely. From this moment." He hung up. By 3 p.m., the harbor was in chaos. 2 massive freighters linked to the Union were sitting dead in the water. 5 miles out, unable to get a tug, a third, already at the dock, had its cranes frozen in midair. He hadn't fired a shot. He hadn't broken a single law. He'd just unplugged them from the harbor. The entire port, the men and women who really ran the water, had chosen a side. They had chosen him. The proof we needed came that night. One of Dario's invisible electricians hand-delivered an envelope. Inside was a single, grainy, long-lens photograph. It was a parking garage, 2 men. One was Ansel Crow. The other was Councilman Davies, the politician leading the charge to seize my cafe. Ansel was handing him a briefcase. "The money man," Dario said. His voice was soft, dangerous. He was playing all sides, selling me out to the Union, selling both of us out to the politicians. He funds the fire. Then he profits from the redevelopment. He's the one who's been leaking the ghost shipment data. And he's been using your name, my level 1, as cover. What do we do? I asked, the photo trembling in my hand. Ansel's smart, Dario said. He's all about schedules, data, predictability. He thinks I'm a brute. He thinks I'm a dinosaur. He picked up his burner phone. So, I'm going to give him what he wants. A predictable target. He began to type. I'm leaking my own schedule. A private solo meeting, the old Charm City line, the 6:15 a.m. run, dawn tomorrow, no security. My stomach turned to ice. Dario, that's a death trap. You're the bait. It's not a trap when you know where the hook is, Dario said, hitting send. It's just fishing. And Ansel is going to have to use the union to do the dirty work. He'll take the bait. He can't resist. The city was still asleep when I left the monastery. 6:15 a.m. The air was cold, tasting of the sea and diesel. I wasn't supposed to be there. Dario had been explicit. Stay at St. Brigid's. Lock the door. Do not move. But the brass compass on its leather cord was heavy under my sweater. It was a promise, and I couldn't let him walk into his own execution alone. I found the Charm City line station. It was elevated, a skeleton of rust and iron bolted above the warehouses. I didn't go to the platform. I bought a ticket and went up to the enclosed overhead walkway that connected the station to a parking garage, giving me a perfect high view of the tracks. I saw him. He looked normal. Just a man in a dark jacket and jeans, hands in his pockets, waiting for the train. He was the bait. He was the most dangerous man in the city, pretending to be a target. The train hissed to a stop, its doors sliding open. It was mostly empty. 2 sleepy commuters, a woman reading a paper. Dario got on the third car, and the janitor got on behind him. I'd seen the janitor on the platform. He'd been there before Dario, lazily pushing a gray mop bucket. He was big, his movements too precise. He rolled his bucket onto the car, and the doors slid shut. The train began to move, pulling out of the station. I walked along the overhead bridge, my footsteps echoing, keeping pace with the train car below. I saw it through the window. The janitor reached into the dirty water of his bucket. He didn't pull out a mop. He pulled out a pistol. It was black, with the thick, ugly cylinder of a suppressor. I didn't have time to scream. Foot, foot, foot! The sound was soft, almost lost in the squeal of the wheels. The 2 commuters screamed. The janitor had missed. Dario had moved like a snake, diving behind a row of seats. He didn't fire back. He lunged, not at the assassin, but at the wall of the train car. He yanked the red T-bar of the emergency brake. The sound was a metallic shriek, a scream of tortured metal that vibrated up through the soles of my shoes. The entire train bucked violently. The passengers were thrown from their seats, on the walkway. I was slammed against the glass wall. Down below, the assassin had been thrown, too. He was scrambling to his feet, trying to get his balance. The train was sliding to a stop, sparks flying from the wheels. Dario was in the next car, separated by the rattling connection joint. The assassin was trying to get the dividing door open, to get to him. Dario was getting up, but he was favoring his side, the old wound. He wasn't moving fast enough. My heart was in my throat. I couldn't get to him. The assassin was directly below me now, on the open-air coupling between the 2 cars, wrestling with the jammed door. My bag. I looked down at my bag. I'd been at the cafe. I'd been grabbing supplies for the monastery. I had coffee, bandages, and yes, a 5-pound box of coarse rock salt for the kitchen grinders. I ripped the cardboard flap open. I was right above him. "Hey!" I screamed. My voice was thin, but he heard it. He looked up, his face a mask of confusion. I inverted the box. A cascade of white crystals. Thousands of them rained down. They hit the wet metal coupling and the man's shoulders. He slipped. It was that fast. His foot braced on the wet metal, shot out from under him. He went down hard, his head cracking against the steel doorframe. His pistol, the one with the suppressor, clattered, bounced, and fell through the gap, vanishing onto the tracks below. Dario was on him in a second. He burst through the door from the other side. It wasn't a fight. It was a removal. He grabbed the assassin's arm, twisted, and slammed the man's face into the floor of the car. It was brutal. It was silent. It was done. I ran. I sprinted down the stairs, jumping the last 4, my bag hitting my back. I hit the platform and wrenched open the train car door. The 2 passengers were huddled at the far end, crying. Dario was hauling the assassin into a seat. The man was groggy, his arm hanging at an angle. Dario? He's Union, Dario grunted, checking the man's pockets. Low level. Ansel wouldn't come himself. The man's eyes flickered. He was conscious. His one good hand, the one not pinned by Dario, moved. It moved slowly. Not for a weapon, but toward his own face, toward his mouth. He was trying to bite down. Dario, his mouth, I yelled. Dario saw it, but he was on the man's wrong side. He couldn't get to him in time. I didn't think. I lunged. I didn't try to pry his lips open. I used my knowledge. I jammed my thumbs into the soft spot just below his jawline, pressing hard on the nerve cluster. It was a move to open an unconscious patient's airway. It was agony. The assassin's jaw locked, then spasmed open with a choked cry. A small, dark gel cap fell from his lips onto the floor. Dario kicked it away. It rolled under a seat. We stared at it. Cyanide. Dario looked at me. The shock in his eyes wasn't from the fight. It was from me. You saved his life. I saved your witness, I said, my voice shaking. We could hear sirens now, approaching the station. We can't stay here, Dario said. He hoisted the assassin to his feet. This way. He dragged the man off the train, not onto the platform, but into a maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the tracks. I followed. The sirens got louder. Dario slammed the assassin against the damp concrete wall. He slapped him, hard. Wake up! The man groaned. Ansel Crow, Dario's voice was pure ice. Where is he? The assassin spat a wad of blood at Dario's feet. Go to hell! Vassallo, you're dead. Ansel's cleaning house. He said you were distracted by her. Dario didn't hit him again. Where is the meat? The man just laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. He's Union, I said, my mind racing. He's not loyal to Ansel. He's loyal to the Union. Ansel is a finance guy. Ansel is going to betray them, too. Isn't he after they kill you? The man's laughter died, and he looked at me. Ansel's using you, Dario said, picking up my thread. He's using you to kill me, and then he's going to use the MSC to wipe out your boss. He gets it all. The man's face, already pale, went white. It was just a pawn, and he knew it. The lock room, he snarled. He's meeting my boss tonight at the lock room under the old aquarium, number 5. He's going to give them everything, your routes, your contacts. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel, not just the cops. MSC, Dario whispered. He pulled out his burner phone. He dialed a number. Agent Feld, he said. Good morning. You're at the Charm City Line station. There's a maintenance tunnel on the east end. I have a gift for you. A moment later, Yara Feld appeared at the end of the tunnel, gun raised. She saw me. She saw Dario. She saw the half-conscious assassin. This is the man who shot at your train, Dario said. He's Union. He tried to take a pill. Mara saved him. He's all yours. Yara was stunned, her gun wavering. You're just giving him to me. I don't need him, Dario said. He just told me what I need to know. The lock room, Aquarium 5. Tonight, Ansel Crow is meeting the Union leadership. He shoved the assassin toward her. You keep him alive. Agent, I need his testimony. I need him to pin this all on Ansel. This was it, the uneasy truce. You're not coming in, Yara asked, starting to cuff the man. I don't surrender, Dario said, already pulling me by the arm, deeper into the tunnel. I just cleaned my own house. We ran. We ran for what felt like a mile, through tunnels that smelled of iron and stagnant water. We emerged onto a small, hidden pier. The Barnacle's Rest, the same ancient shrimp boat from the first night, was waiting. The old sailor, Sal, was at the helm. Boss, Sal said, his voice grim. We got company. They were watching the station and the water. He was right. As we jumped on deck, 2 black, low-profile speedboats appeared from around the main breakwater. They were fast. They were Union. "Go? Sal, go." Dario shoved me into the tiny cabin. The Shrimper's engine roared, but it was a tugboat, not a racer. The speedboats were gaining. Then that sound. Foot, foot, foot. Bullets, muffled by suppressors, chipped the wooden rail next to my head. "Get on the radio," Dario yelled from the wheelhouse. "Channel 14 now." I grabbed the crackling microphone. "Who am I calling?" Everyone," he shouted. "They're all listening. My people. The fishermen. Tell them. North Harbor Union. They're firing on Salty Mike's friend." Salty Mike's friend. He was using my name, my reputation. My hand was shaking, but I keyed the mic. "This is Mara Quinn from the Harbor Light Cafe. I'm on the Barnacle's Rest. We are under attack 2 Union speedboats east of the Narrows." For a second, just static. Then a voice, thick with a harbor accent. "This is the Triton. Heard you. Harbor Light. We see 'em. Hang on, kid." Another crackle. "This is the Jenny May. We're coming." I looked out the back. It was beautiful. From the side channels, from the oyster beds, from the fishing docks they came. Not speedboats, big, wide, rusted trawlers, oyster dredgers, crab boats, maybe 10 of them. They didn't charge. They just formed a line, a floating blockade of heavy steel hulls and trawling nets. The Union speedboats were fast, but they weren't stupid. They couldn't get through. They swerved, their engines screaming in frustration, trapped by a wall of ordinary fishermen. "Told you," Dario said, his voice grim. "A clean port." He steered the Shrimper toward a hidden inlet, a derelict canning factory I'd never seen. We slid against the rotting wooden dock. "We're clear," I said, my knees weak with relief. "No," Dario said, his voice tight. "We're not—" He was looking up. At the factory roof, 4 stories up. A glint of light, the reflection of a scope, a sniper. "Mara, down." He didn't push me. He threw his entire body at me, covering me, shielding me. We crashed against the bulkhead of the boat. I heard the crack of the rifle a split second after I heard the thwack of the bullet hitting the wood where I had just been standing. Then another whine. The bullet tore through the air, and I felt a sharp, stinging burn right at my ear. It had ripped through the strap of my bag, grazing the skin. Dario roared, a sound of pure rage. He grabbed me. "Go the ladder, go!" He shoved me toward the dock ladder. I scrambled up, my feet finding the rotting rungs. "Dario, come on!" He followed, climbing right behind me. He stumbled as he hit the dock. "Dario?" He was clutching his left arm. The sleeve of his dark jacket was torn. He was bleeding. Again. He nicked me. He grunted, pulling me behind a stack of rusted lobster pots. "It's nothing." My ear was bleeding. His arm was bleeding. We were trapped. "Nothing," I hissed. I was crying, but I was furious. "You're bleeding. You took a bullet for me. Stop it. Stop being so reckless. Stop doing that." He leaned against the brick wall, breathing heavily. He looked at me, his eyes dark, the pain there. But the calm was still there, too. "It's not reckless, Mara," he said, his voice low. "It's a choice. I choose my risks. And you are the one risk I will always take." He grabbed my good hand, ignoring the sniper. He pulled me toward a large, circular iron grate set in the concrete. He didn't need a tool. He stomped on the far edge. The heavy plate popped up. "The city under the city," he said. "I know this map better than the one above. Come on." He helped me down into the darkness. It smelled of salt and old stone. He pulled the grate closed over our heads, plunging us into total blackness. We walked for what felt like an eternal 5 minutes. We emerged in the monastery basement. Dario's burner phone buzzed. It was a news alert, automatically pushed to his screen. He showed it to me. MSC issues warrant for arrest of Ansel Crow. Charges include racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted murder of a federal witness. "A witness," I whispered. "You," he said. "The sniper just made you a federal witness. Mara, Yara just declared all-out war. The board is set, Ansel is trapped. He's got nowhere to go but the lock room. I looked at him. He was pale. The blood on his arm was soaking his sleeve. "You're hurt," I said. "It's a graze," he said, dismissing it. "It can wait. We have to plan." "No." I put my hand on his chest. Go to your condo. Get that fixed. By a real doctor, clean up. You're no good to me exhausted and bleeding out." He looked surprised. I was giving him orders. "Go home," I said, my voice firm. "Get washed up. Get patched up." He nodded slowly. "And you?" "I'm going to do the same," I said, touching my bleeding ear, "because this isn't over." He looked at me. A long, deep look. "No. The final storm, it's just about to hit." My apartment, number 14 Fleet Alley, had become the eye of the storm. The front door was new. The lock was heavy, but the smell of old coffee and barnacles. My cat was the same. It was the only place that felt real. I came back after Dario insisted. He'd gone, presumably to his high-rise condo, to have his own doctor, a man I assumed who was very good at not filing paperwork, look at the sniper's graze on his arm. I'd cleaned the nick on my ear. The black powder burned, stinging, and put a small bandage on it. He showed up 2 hours later. Just as the sun was setting, he was wearing a fresh, dark gray Henley, but the sleeve was already stained dark red where the new bandage on his bicep had bled through. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that even a mafia boss couldn't hide, but when he looked at me, his eyes were warm. I was in my tiny kitchen, which was really just a corner of the main room. The mocha pot, my dad's old silver one, was hissing on the hot plate. "It's going to be terrible," I warned him, pointing to the pot. "It's the only way I know how." "It's perfect," he said, his voice rough. He sat at my tiny, wobbly kitchen table, the one that only had 2 chairs. He looked huge in the small space, a lion in a bird cage. He'd washed his face, but there were scrapes on his knuckles from the train fight, the skin broken and dark. I poured the thick, dark coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. I pushed one toward him, then went to my first aid kit. I pulled out the antiseptic and a small, square bandage. I sat down opposite him and, without asking, I took his left hand. It was massive in mine, calloused, scarred, a map of a life I couldn't imagine. "This is gonna sting, too," I said, dabbing the wipe on his knuckles. He just watched my fingers. He didn't pull away. He didn't even flinch. He just let me... This was different from the monastery. That was survival. This was something else. This was mending. "You're a worrier, Mara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Someone has to be," I retorted, smoothing the bandage over his hand. "You're clearly terrible at it." I looked at his arm. "Your doctor, he did a good job." "He'll send me a bill," Dario said, which I knew meant the man was well paid for his silence. "It's fine. It missed the muscle." I got up and went to the counter, pulling a box from the pantry. You need to eat something that isn't adrenaline. I pulled out a packet of instant oatmeal. "It's all I have." "That's fine." As I turned to boil the water in the kettle, I saw his gaze drift. He was looking at the small, cluttered shelf by my door, specifically at a single faded photograph in a cheap frame. It was my mom. She was younger, smiling, her hair big in that 80s way. She was wearing a crisp, white hospital uniform. A nurse's pin was on her lapel. "That's my mom," I said, my voice soft. "Before, she was a nurse at the county hospital, back when it was still good." "She taught you," he said, connecting the dots. The first aid, the artery in the alley, the jaw lock on the assassin. "She tried," I said, pouring the hot water into the bowl. "She got sick. Her heart. The insurance was what it was. She's been on a waiting list for a new valve for a long time, 18 months. I stirred the oatmeal, staring into the bowl, suddenly angry at the world. I've been saving for the copay. It's a lot. I brought the bowl over and set it in front of him. "Eat." I turned my back to him, pretending to wash the mocha pot. Barnacles was winding around his legs, and I saw Dario, out of the corner of my eye, reach down and scratch the old cat's head. He ate a few bites of the oatmeal. Then, while he thought I wasn't looking, he pulled out his burner phone. His gaze flickered from the picture of my mom to his phone screen and back. He typed a short, rapid series of texts. He was frowning, his focus absolute. I assumed it was about Ansel, about the lock room. I didn't know he was moving mountains. I didn't know he was typing Harbor Heart Fund, activate it, pay the entire balance for Ellen Quinn, County General, now, and find her the best surgeon. I don't care what it costs. He put the phone away just as I turned around. He finished the oatmeal in silence. We sat there, the light in the attic turning a deep, bruised purple. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was shared. I always wanted a window box, I said, for no reason at all. The words just came out. He looked at me. A window box. For Basil, I said, feeling stupid. Right on the windowsill. And wind chimes, but not the metal ones. They just rust. The salt. Everything here smells like salt and diesel. He looked around my tiny, cramped attic room. He looked at the single, slanted window that faced a brick wall. You want a place, he said, where the wind chimes don't rust. It's a stupid dream, I murmured. A small, stupid dream. No, he said. It's not. It's the only kind that matters. The quiet settled again, but this time, it was my quiet that was heavy. The fear was coming back, not the adrenaline-fueled fear of being shot, a different, slower, colder fear. It feels fake, I whispered, staring into my empty coffee mug. This quiet, me bandaging your hand, you eating oatmeal. It's like we're playing house in the middle of a war zone. I'm terrified. Dario, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the sirens. This peace, it's just the deep breath before the scream. He was silent for a long moment. He reached across the table, not for my hand, but just to lay his own, the one I'd just bandaged. Flat on the wood, a solid, present fact. You're right, he said. It is. The storm is coming, Mara. We both know it. This peace, this isn't real. Not yet. He leaned forward and his voice dropped. So we'll make our own. We'll make a peace that isn't about avoiding the storm. We'll make one that can handle the wind. His words, can handle the wind, hung in the air. And then the knock came. It wasn't a hard knock. It was a sharp, official rap, rap, rap. Dario was on his feet, his hand inside his jacket, before the third knock finished. Barnacles hissed and disappeared under the sofa. It's her, I said. I could feel it. The agent. Yara Feld. Dario nodded. He moved away from the door, into the shadows by the kitchen, his hand never leaving his jacket. He was giving me the power to answer. I opened the door. Yara stood there. She wasn't in her yoga pants. She was in a sharp, dark pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back. She looked exhausted, and she was angry. Can I come in, Miss Quinn? She's not alone, Dario's voice came from the shadows. Yara's eyes snapped to him. Her hand automatically went to the gun on her hip. Vassallo, of course. What do you want? Agent Dario asked. The warrant for Ansel Crow, she said, clipping her words. It's been pulled. My stomach dropped. What pulled? But he's the one, he's the leak. He hired the assassin. The U.S. Attorney's office just quashed it, Yara said, stepping inside and closing the door. She was so angry she was vibrating, citing insufficient evidence. My witness, she nodded at Dario. The assassin you so kindly gifted me was found in his holding cell, dead. Heart failure. They're calling it, at 29, convenient. Ansel, Dario stated. He has someone inside your office, too. Not just my office, Yara said, and she looked truly defeated. Inside the MSC, I put in the tactical plan for the lock room raid 2 hours ago, and 15 minutes ago, all the lights at Aquarium 5 went out. The whole block is dark. They're gone. They knew we were coming. The room was suddenly very cold. This changed everything. This wasn't just us against the Union or us against Ansel. Ansel had a man on the inside. The feds, the good guys, were compromised. "There's a rat," I whispered. "There's a nest of them." Yara spat. She looked at Dario. "He's going to walk. Crow is going to walk right onto a private jet tonight, and the city is going to hand him the keys to your entire operation, and mine. Ansel wouldn't just win. He would take it all." Dario stepped out of the shadow. "No, he won't." Yara looked at him, confused. "You're a civilian, Vassallo. You're a person of interest. I can't officially sanction." "I don't need your sanction, Agent Feld," Dario said. "I never did. But Ansel isn't just my problem anymore. He's yours. He's embarrassed your agency. He's made you look like a fool. And he's going to keep moving those ghost containers, which is the only reason you're here in the first place." Yara was silent. He was right. "You're cut off," Dario continued. "Your own people are feeding you bad intel. You can't trust your team. You can't trust your superiors. But you can, for the next 12 hours, trust me." "Why?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Because we both want the same thing," Dario said. "We want him out of our harbor. Your motive is justice. Mine is simpler." He glanced at me. "You stay on the outside. You run interference with the official channels. You keep your compromised team busy, and I will go into the lock room. I'll get you Ansel, and I'll get you the proof of who his man on the inside is. A three-way, impossible truce, a criminal, a federal agent, and a waitress." Yara looked at me, then at Dario. She hated it. She hated him. But she was a good agent, and she was cornered. "You get me the mole," Yara said, her voice hard. "You get me the mole, Vassallo, and I'll be busy with paperwork. But if you cross me—" "You won't have to," Dario said. Yara nodded once. She left without another word. The door clicked shut, leaving us in the heavy silence. The storm was no longer coming. It was here. That night, we didn't sleep. We went up to the roof, the one connected to the useless fire escape. We sat on the cold tar, leaning against the brick chimney, looking out over the harbor. The harbor lights were smeared in the mist, the red and green channel markers, the high sodium yellow of the cranes. It was a beautiful, dangerous, breathing thing. My city, his city. He put his arm, his good one, around my shoulders, and I leaned my head against his chest. I could feel the slow, steady beat of his heart. The compass he'd given me was warm against my skin, pressed between us. We just sat. We watched the boats. We listened to the distant foghorns. We didn't talk about Ansel or Yara or the mole or the lock room. We didn't have to. We were just breathing, together. After a long time, I tilted my head up. He looked down at me. The city lights were reflected in his dark eyes. This time, the kiss wasn't the desperate, frantic collision of the monastery. It was slow. It was deep. It was a promise. He kissed my forehead, my closed eyelids, the corner of my mouth. His lips were soft, questioning. I raised my hand to his face, my thumb tracing the hard line of his jaw. His other hand found the small of my back, pulling me closer. His breath was warm, ghosting across my cheek. I could feel the tremor in his hand, and I knew it wasn't from the cold. It was from the absolute, ironclad control he was exercising. He was letting me lead. He was giving me all the power. My fingers tangled in his hair, and I pulled him down. The kiss was deep, a silent conversation of fear and hope, and a terrible, beautiful certainty. My other hand found his, the one I had bandaged, our fingers laced together, tight, unbreakable. And that's where we stayed, just holding on, a quiet, defiant peace that was strong enough for any wind. The next morning, the gray light was unforgiving. We were both exhausted. I was making coffee, the real kind this time, from the bag he'd had delivered. I was dressed. I'd put the leather cord back on. I looked at the little brass compass piece, resting on my sweater. Dario came up behind me. He'd been quiet. I turned. "It found its north," he said, his voice soft. He gently tapped the compass with his finger. I smiled. Maybe it did. The smoke alarm went off. The toast, I yelped. I ran to the toaster and pulled out 2 slices of bread. They weren't just toasted. They were black, charred, ruined. I looked at the blackened squares and then at him. The last 48 hours, the shooting, the sniper, the mole, the impending battle, it all came crashing down. I started to laugh. It was a crazy, slightly hysterical laugh. Dario looked at me, confused. "It's burnt," I said, gasping for air. It's completely burnt." A slow smile spread across his face. He understood. He took one of the slices, broke off a corner, and bravely put it in his mouth. He chewed. "It's edible," he declared. I laughed again, and he joined me. We were a mess. We were damaged. We were half destroyed, but we were still here. We were burnt, but we were edible. The burnt toast was a metaphor, and we both knew it. We were starting the final act running on fumes, adrenaline, and bad coffee. The truce with Yara Feld was fragile, a thing held together by mutual desperation. We were back in the server room at St. Brigid's, the air humming. The calm was over. "Ansel's smart," Dario said, his voice flat. He was at the main console, his new bandage a stark white against his dark shirt. "He won't just run. He'll try to burn the evidence, the witnesses, and my organization, all at once. He's not just a rat, he's a pyromaniac." "The ghost shipments," I said, my mind catching the thread. "The ones using my dad's code, and the City Hall committee." "Exactly." Dario pulled up a split screen. On the left, he loaded the Port Development Committee's public meeting schedule for the last 6 months. On the right, he pulled the manifests from the ghost containers Ansel had leaked. My breath caught. "Dario, look." I pointed. March 4th, the committee had a closed-door session on zoning. 8 p.m., and here I tapped the other screen. March 5th, 2 a.m., a ghost container of pharmaceuticals cleared the gate. Every single time. The committee meets. A high-value shipment disappears within 6 hours. "He was using the committee meetings as a distraction," Dario growled. "While the harbor cops were busy managing security for the politicians, he was moving his product." "He needed the committee to seize my cafe," I added, the pieces clicking with a cold, sick precision. "To get the one piece of the terminal you didn't control. He wasn't just stealing from you. He was staging a corporate takeover, using the union as his muscle and the city as his legal team." Dario's burner phone, the one he'd used to call Yara, buzzed on the console. It was a text. He read it, his face hardening. "It's worse." He showed me the screen. It was from Yara. "Ansel is the signatory on a Shell Corp North Harbor Renewal Fund. It made a $50,000 donation to the MSC Widows and Orphans Fund. Last week, my compromised boss signed the thank you note." "He wasn't just playing the city," I whispered. "He was inside the MSC. He was paying them. He bought his own federal protection." "He's not a rat," Dario said, his voice deadly quiet. "He's a partner. He's been feeding them low-level union guys to make them look good, while he moved the real money, and now he's cashing out." "So, the lock room, tonight, he's not just meeting the union," I reasoned. He's cleaning house. He'll get them all in one place, and then he'll use his MSC mole to raid them. He'll be the hero, the man who helped the feds clean up the harbor. And the man who survived my violent regime," Dario finished. "He wins. He gets the contracts, the port, and a medal from the mayor. We can't let him. We won't." Dario crossed the room to a wall I'd never looked at twice. It was covered in old, rolled blueprints of the monastery. He pulled one from the very back. It wasn't for the church. It was older, much older. "The city under the city," he said, spreading the dry, cracking paper on the table. "This monastery was built on the ruins of the old 19th century harbor house, and the Aquarium 5 was built on the foundation of the old customs house." He traced a thin, blue line with his finger. It ran from our basement straight under the modern streets and ended directly beneath the aquarium, the old water management tunnels from the 1890s. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the technical drawings. They'll be gated, locked. He'll have men on the modern entrances, Dario said. But this one hasn't been on a map in 100 years. He tapped a point on the diagram. Here, the main junction. The lock is marked Type 4, Harbor Electric. My heart skipped. I know that lock. Dario looked at me. It's not a key, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden, strange confidence. My daddy used to curse about them. The old-timers used them on the lighthouses and the automated foghorn stations. It's from the 1950s. It doesn't use a key. It's electric. It needs a signal, a light signal. Dario stared at me. Your code. My dad's code. The plan clicked into place. It was insane. It was beautiful. The two-key plan, Dario said, the name coming to him instantly. Ansel is playing 2 games, so will we. He grabbed his burner. I'm calling Yara. She's the first key. She can't trust her team, so she's our diversion. She's going to make a public scene. She's going to take the warrant, the one her boss quashed, and go to City Hall. She's going to try and arrest Ansel at the 10 p.m. budget meeting. It'll be loud. It'll be public. It'll draw Ansel's pet mole out of the shadows. It'll make Ansel think he's safe, that our only attack is coming from the front. And the second key, I asked, though I already knew. Us, he said, tapping the map. While he's watching the news feed of Yara at City Hall, we're coming in through the basement. We cut the head off the Union. We get the proof. We get him. The walk through the tunnels was like descending into a cold grave. The air was thick, wet, and smelled of rust and something ancient and briny. Dario had a high-powered flashlight, but we mostly walked in the dim glow of the few emergency bulbs. He had his gun. I had my dad's old maritime flashlight, heavy and brass, and the knowledge. He was quiet, his focus absolute. He was a predator in his element. I was just terrified. But I was also angry. It was raining, I said, my voice sounding too loud in the dripping quiet. Dario stopped, turning. What? On the night my mom's heart first failed, I said, the words spilling out. It was a storm, like the first night I met you. I was maybe 17. The doctors were all talking in code, and I couldn't understand them. I just remember standing in the hospital hallway, dripping wet, feeling completely, utterly useless. I couldn't do anything. I didn't have the words or the money or the knowledge. I was just the girl who was scared. I stopped, my hand tightening on the brass flashlight. I hated that feeling. I hated being the one who didn't know the code. Dario watched me, his face unreadable in the gloom. I'm not her anymore, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm not useless, and this time, I know the code. He didn't say anything. He just reached out, his thumb brushing my cheek where the sniper's bullet had grazed my ear. A simple, grounding touch. He understood. Then he turned and kept walking. We reached a massive, vaulted brick room. It was filled with colossal, silent machinery. Pipes as wide as I was tall. Huge, cast-iron wheels. The pump room, Dario whispered. This controls the tide flow for the entire tunnel system, and the old aquarium overflow. Dario, look. I pointed the beam of my light at the floor. Footprints. Wet, modern boot prints. And a smell. Faint, but sharp. Expensive cigar smoke. He's here. Dario's voice was a low growl. He's not at City Hall. He was never gonna be. The Yara diversion, he's using it against us. He's playing 3 deep, I whispered, my stomach nodding. He's selling out the Union to his MSC mole. He's letting Yara think she's chasing him, and he's here, at the choke point, to finish the game himself. He's been ahead of us the whole time. Dario checked his weapon. This changes the plan. You stay here. You lock this door behind me. If I'm not back in 20 minutes... No. He stopped, his hand on the door. Mara, this isn't a debate. I said no, I said, stepping in front of him. My heart was a hummingbird, but my voice was steel. I put my hand on his chest. I could feel the hard muscle, the tension. You can't get through the next door without me. You don't know the code, and I'm not going to be that useless girl in the hallway ever again. We go together. He stared at me for a long, hard second, the man who gave all the orders. He was being defied by a waitress. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. "Okay, Mara, we go together." The next door was heavy steel. A small, grimy panel was set into the wall beside it, a single, dark glass bulb. I shined my flashlight on it. Behind the glass, I could see the old 50s-era light sensor. A Union guard, a man built like a refrigerator, was on the other side, visible through a small, barred window. He saw us and raised his rifle. "We're with Crow," Dario yelled. "Crow ain't seeing anyone," the guard yelled back. "He'll see us," I said. I stepped in front of Dario. I raised my heavy brass flashlight. I didn't point it at the guard, I pointed it at the sensor. I clicked it on. 113, short, short, long. I clicked it off. Pause. I clicked it on. 21, short, short, long. It was my dad's code, the one Ansel's man had stolen, the one they were using for the ghost containers. The guard's face went from suspicion to confusion. He lowered his rifle, and he was just a grunt. He'd been told that code meant authorized cargo. We heard a heavy mechanical thunk. The lock disengaged. The room was vast. It was the old below decks of the aquarium. The massive, cylindrical tanks rose up into the darkness, the water glowing a faint, spectral blue, and in the center, on a raised platform, were Ansel Crow and 3 men I recognized as the top lieutenants of the North Harbor Union. They weren't just meeting, Ansel was performing. A high-spec camera was pointed at him. He was speaking into a microphone, a laptop open in front of him, a live stream. "And that is why, gentlemen," Ansel was saying, his voice smooth and political, "the old ways are ending, Mr. Vassallo's chaotic. Violent methods are a liability. The harbor needs stability. It needs a new, peaceful partnership, which I am here to offer." He was broadcasting. He was creating a false narrative, a peace summit, pinning all the blame for the week's violence on Dario. He was setting himself up as the savior. The union bosses looked skeptical. They were here for money, not speeches. "Shut it down," Dario whispered to me. I saw it. Across the platform, a thick bundle of orange cables running from the camera and the laptop to a heavy, industrial power junction. Dario drew his gun. Moving to the left, I moved right. The Union goons hadn't seen us. Ansel was too busy with his speech. I got to the junction box. It was old, a heavy metal lever. I grabbed it. "This new harbor," Ansel said, smiling at the camera, "will be open, profitable, and under stable management." I pulled the lever. K-chunk. The camera went dead. The laptop screen went black. The only lights left were the blue glow of the fish tanks. Ansel froze. He spun around. Who's there?" "The old management," Dario said, stepping into the blue light. The Union men went for their guns. "I wouldn't," Dario said, his aim steady. "You're not my problem tonight. He is." Ansel's smugness was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. He saw me, standing by the power switch. "You!" He spat. He actually laughed, a short, ugly sound. "The waitress. After all this, he's going to get himself killed for a waitress." I felt Dario flinch. That one word waitress, it was the one insult that still had power. It was meant to shrink me, to make me small. I took a step forward, into the light. "That's right," I said, my voice clear and ringing in the huge, damp room. "I'm the waitress, and I'm just smart enough to know when it's time to clear the table." Dario's head snapped toward me. He was stunned. That half second of distraction, of pride, was all Ansel needed. Ansel didn't reach for a gun. He lunged for a small, red panel on the wall behind him, the main pump controls, a single, large, red button under a glass cover, a dead man's switch. "If I can't have the harbor," Ansel screamed, his hand hovering over the switch. "No one will!" He was going to flood the tunnels. He was going to drown us all, the Union leaders, us, himself. Dario raised his gun, but he was too far away. I didn't have a weapon. I had a metal, insulated coffee mug clipped to my bag. I ripped it from the clip. No, you don't. I threw it, underhand, hard. It wasn't aimed at Ansel. It was aimed at the glass cover of the switch. It hit, a sharp crack of metal on glass. It didn't break the cover, but the impact was enough. It knocked Ansel's hand sideways at the exact second he tried to slam it down. Guns were out. Everyone was screaming. And in my ear, the tiny radio Yara had given me crackled to life. It was her voice. She was panicked. She was breathless. Mara Dario, do you read me, my team? My team's been compromised. They're not at City Hall. They're feeding me bad intel. The mole is real. I'm blind. I repeat. The mole is... The line went dead, just static. Ansel was smiling. He'd heard it, too. He knew we were alone. Ansel didn't wait for my mug to even hit the ground. My throw, my defiant clearing the table line, had only broken the glass cover. It hadn't stopped him. He roared, a sound of pure, aristocratic rage, and slammed his open palm onto the exposed red button. But it wasn't the flood button. It was worse. A new, deeper groan of machinery. Far below us shook the concrete. It felt like the entire building was waking up. The red emergency lights flashed on, bathing the vast blue-lit room in a pulsing, bloody light. An alarm, a deafening, shrieking klaxon, split the air. "What did you do?" one of the union bosses screamed, finally realizing this was a setup. "The reverse tide pumps!" Ansel shrieked, his voice giddy with madness. "I'm not just flooding the tunnels, I'm bringing the entire harbor in." He was right. Water, black, icy, and stinking of the deep channel silt, didn't just leak. It erupted. It burst from the floor grates, a dozen geysers of freezing water. In seconds, it was at our ankles. In 10, it was at our knees. The Union men, trapped, turned their guns, but Ansel was already scrambling up a maintenance ladder, vanishing into the scaffolding. They turned their guns on the only target left, us. "Vassallo," the lead boss yelled, trying to wade through the rising current. "We want a deal. Now give us the girl. We'll use her to bargain with your Fed. Give us the girl, and we'll let you walk." They saw me. The waitress. The weak link. The one thing he'd proven he would stop a war for. The water was at my waist. It was so cold it stole my breath. It was trying to pull me off my feet. Dario shoved me behind him. He raised his gun, but the water was a surging, powerful force. "You can't have her." "Then take me," Dario yelled, his voice echoing off the tanks. "You want Vassallo. You want the prize. I'm right here. Let her go." He was offering himself, again, for me. "No," I shouted, grabbing the back of his jacket, my voice shaking but loud. "I'm not a bargaining chip." It was the last word. The union boss opened fire. Dario didn't fire back. He grabbed my arm and hauled me through a heavy, steel-plated door into the exhibit itself. We were in a long, curved tunnel, but the walls were 6-inch thick acrylic. We were inside the old, abandoned main tank. The water was black on the other side, but the pulsing red emergency light from the main room cast a hellish glow. And in the water, on the other side of the glass, they were watching. Fish, pale, ghostly, enormous fish. Groupers, eels, things that hadn't seen the sun in a decade. They had been left here, fed by some long-forgotten automated system. Their eyes were like milky marbles, huge and silent, passing by as they watched us. No civilians, no children, just us, and these ancient, silent witnesses. The bullets began. Foot, foot, foot. The Union men were in the tunnel with us, using suppressors. Sparks flew as rounds ricocheted off the steel framework above our heads. "Move, Mara," Dario yelled, pulling me. We were waiting, but the water in the tunnel was rising just as fast. The current was a river. I looked up, through the acrylic ceiling, through the black water of the tank. I could see the upper gantry, the steel catwalks, and a flashlight beam. "Yara!" I screamed. My voice was lost in the alarm. She was up there, lost. Her radio was dead, her team was compromised, and she had no idea where we were. She was running. her light cutting frantically through the darkness. "She can't find us," I yelled to Dario. "The mole, they must have locked her out of the main level." "We can't wait for her," Dario fired twice, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. He forced the men to duck behind a curve. I looked at Yara's frantic, useless light. I looked at the glass. I had my flashlight, my dad's heavy, brass signal light. "Dario, buy me 5 seconds. I stood still. I aimed my flashlight beam up, through the acrylic, through the dark water. I aimed it right at her light. And I clicked. 113, short, short, long, pause, 21, short, short, long. My dad's code, the emergency. Her light beam stopped. It jerked. It pointed straight down. She'd seen me. I didn't stop. I pointed my light to the far end of the tunnel, to a small, square steel hatch. I mouthed the words, praying she could see me. Maintenance. Hatch C. Then I flashed the light again. Charlie. ... Her beam vanished. She was running. She understood. A new sound. A gunshot, but not from behind us. From above. Ping. The sound was sharp, metallic. A bullet, a high-caliber one, had just sparked off the steel frame right above my head. Ansel. He was on the gantry with Yara. He must have doubled back. "He hit the secondary pump," Dario roared. A new noise, a deafening, gushing torrent. The water, which had been at our chests, became a wave. It hit me, solid as a wall, pulling me under. I came up, choking. The water level was rising impossibly fast. It was at my neck. We had seconds. "He's trying to collapse the tunnel," Dario yelled, his eyes wide. Ansel fired again. Ping! The bullet whined past my head. Dario didn't hesitate. He threw his entire body at me, covering me, shielding me. I felt the heavy, solid thud as he hit me, and in the same instant, I heard the thwack of the bullet hitting him. "Dario." "I'm fine," he grunted, but I felt the warmth of his blood mix with the cold of the harbor water. He hit my shoulder. "It's nothing, move." The floor was coated in years of slime. My feet shot out from under me. I was going down. His hand, the good one, grabbed the front of my jacket. He didn't just catch me. He hauled me, half drowning, toward a small, round steel hatch set in the tunnel wall, a filtration room. He grabbed the wheel, his muscles straining, and broke the water seal. He shoved me through the opening. We fell, tumbling, onto a dry metal floor. He slammed the round hatch closed and spun the wheel, sealing us in. We were in a box, a tiny, steel room, maybe 5 feet square. The only sound was the muffled klaxon and the deafening, thundering roar of the water on the other side of the wall. I was pressed against him, soaked, shaking. My breath was gone. His breath was coming in ragged, painful gasps. I could feel the heat of him through our wet clothes, the solid wall of his chest, his shoulder. My hand was on it. It was soaked in blood. "You're hit," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's a graze," he lied, his forehead pressed against mine. We were too close. The world was ending, and we were in this box, just breathing. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." His eyes, his dark eyes, in the faint red glow from the door's porthole, were looking at my mouth. Clang, clang, clang! A heavy, metallic pounding, not from the tunnel, from above us. "Mara, Dario, get away from the wall." It was Yara. My signal had worked. Dario and I scrambled apart, the spell broken. "We have to stop this," Dario yelled, seeing a massive red cast-iron wheel on the wall. The manual override for this entire section. This is it. He grabbed it, his face tight with pain. "It's stuck rusted." I put my hands on it, next to his, together counterclockwise pull. We threw our combined weight against it. The metal screamed, a high-pitched shriek of protest. My shoulders felt like they were ripping. Dario let out a low, pained roar. With a final, bone-jarring thud, the wheel gave way. It spun, and the sound of the thundering water outside lessened. It didn't stop, but the surge was over. A loud crash from above. The ceiling hatch flew open. Yara was there, her face streaked with grime. She dropped a heavy nylon rope. Go, go, go! We climbed out onto the main operations floor. It was pure chaos. Yara's loyal team, the 2 agents she'd brought from outside the city, were in a firefight with the 3 union bosses. "Where's Crow?" Yara yelled over the gunfire. "Gone," Dario said. He didn't even look at his bleeding shoulder. He was scanning, hunting. He pointed. "The subdoc. He's running." He was off. He didn't wait. He just ran. "Dario, wait." He was too fast, but I saw it. A parallel path, an enclosed, glass-walled walkway, 1 story up, that overlooked the ramp he was taking. I ran for the stairs. I was on the walkway, sprinting, keeping pace with him. He was on the dark ramp below, separated from me by a pane of glass. I could see Ansel, maybe 50 yards ahead of him. He was at a small, wooden dock. A speedboat was tied up. Dario couldn't see him around the curve. I pounded on the glass. My fist hit the pane. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Dario heard it. He looked up, saw me. I didn't need a code. I just pointed ahead. He nodded. He understood. He burst out onto the subdock just as Ansel was jumping onto the boat. "It's over, Ansel," Dario yelled, his gun raised and steady, despite his arm. "Is it?" Ansel smiled. He was on the boat, his hand on the throttle. He wasn't even armed. "I don't think so. Dario, you always had a choice to make." He pointed to the bow of the boat. My blood ran cold. Tied to the front cleat, gagged and bound, was a man, just a man, a homeless man, wrapped in rags, his eyes wide with terror. He was tied, with a complex web of wires, to a large metal container. "A dead man's switch," I whispered, seeing it from my high vantage point. "No, a live man's switch. His weight is holding the trigger off. If he's moved—" "You have a choice, old man," Ansel shouted, his voice echoing in the concrete cavern. "Me or the bum, you can't have both." Ansel hit the throttle. The boat's engine roared to life. He was getting away. Dario didn't hesitate. He didn't even look at Ansel's escaping boat. He lunged, not for Ansel, but for the boat, for the man. "Dario, no, it's a trap," I screamed. He was on the bow, his hands on the terrified man, his eyes trying to trace the wires. "He's tied to the trigger. I can't move him." I didn't wait. I ran from the walkway, skidding down the ramp. I hit the dock. "The mooring ropes! Mara cut them!" Dario yelled. Ansel was gone. His boat was already disappearing into the dark waterway. He had won. I pulled the small, sharp utility knife I'd started carrying in my boot. I sawed at the thick, wet rope holding the boat to the dock. The boat was drifting. "Dario, jump." "I can't," he yelled. "The knots they're wired. Get out of here." "Then move the boat," I yelled. I sawed through the last fiber. The line snapped. The boat was free, drifting into the middle of the channel. I put my feet on the edge of the dock and I pushed. I shoved the heavy wooden bow with every ounce of strength I had, away from the concrete pier, away from me. "Dario, jump." He got the man's gag off. "Hold your breath," he roared at the terrified man. He looked at me. One last, desperate look. Then he grabbed the man and rolled, both of them tumbling over the far side of the boat, into the black water, just as the boat drifted 30 yards out. I was still on the dock when it exploded. The sound was not a sound. It was a physical punch, a white-hot fist of pressure that lifted me off my feet and threw me backward, skidding across the concrete. The heat was scorching. The air was sucked from my lungs. Then, silence. Just the blaring klaxon and the sound of falling water. The flood, its pumps destroyed, was already receding. I was on my back, my ears ringing. Yara was the first to me. "Mara, are you okay? Are you hit?" "Dario," I gasped, trying to sit up. I saw him, and he was pulling himself out of the water, dragging the coughing, sputtering homeless man onto the dock. He was soaked to the bone. He was bleeding from his shoulder. He was shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. Yara's agents were swarming the dock. She was personally cuffing the 3 shell-shocked union bosses. "Where's Crow?" she barked into her radio. The radio crackled. "Negative, Agent. The waterway is empty. He's gone. vanished like smoke. Dario walked over to me. He ignored Yara. He ignored the agents. He ignored the man he'd just saved. He just walked to me, his chest heaving. We stood there, soaked, bleeding, alive. He looked at me, his eyes dark with a million emotions. We had saved the pawn. We had checkmated the Union. But the real king, the traitor, had escaped. We had chosen to be human, and the price for our humanity was victory. We didn't sleep. How could we? We sat in my tiny attic apartment, patched up and bleeding, the adrenaline long gone, leaving behind the cold, hollow ache of reality. Ansel was gone. He'd escaped. We'd won the battle. But he, the architect of it all, had slipped through our fingers. The sun came up, a sick gray light, and with it came the buzzing of Dario's phone. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. "He's calling a press conference," I said, numb. "Ansel, he's going to pin the explosion on you. He'll say you set the trap. He'll be the victim." "No," Dario said. He was standing, looking out my one window at the brick wall. He was wearing his last clean shirt. His arm was stiff, his shoulder a landscape of purple bruising. Not his press conference, mine. By 9 a.m, the harbor was a circus. He'd called it for the main pier, right in front of my cafe, right in front of the harbor light. He'd chosen the location. Our ground. There were cameras, reporters, half the city council, smelling blood in the water, looking smug, and the workers, hundreds of them, longshoremen, crane operators, tugboat pilots. They stood in the back, their faces grim, unsure if they were here to see a coronation or an execution. I stood beside him. I was terrified. My ear throbbed. The brass compass was cold against my skin. I was the waitress, dragged into the center of the storm. Dario, his lawyer, the same one from the courthouse, whispered, "This is insane. You're a target. Ansel is still out there." "Let him come," Dario said. And then, the first shock of the day. A black sedan, an official government car, pulled up. Agent Yara Feld got out. She wasn't in her yoga pants or her tactical gear. She was in a severe official suit. She didn't look at us. She just walked to the podium and stood, arms crossed, a silent federal presence. The crowd murmured. The councilman looked confused. The wolf was sharing a stage with the shepherd. Dario stepped up to the microphones. The clicking of cameras was the only sound. He looked terrible, and he was pale. He hadn't slept, and he was wounded. But he had never looked more powerful. He looked like a king. "For 30 years, he began, his voice low and amplified, carrying over the water. "This harbor has operated under one name, mine, the Vassallo Group. It has been a business of shadows and backroom deals, and it has been profitable." The reporters scribbled, "This was a confession." "But the harbor has been sick," he continued. "It's been sick with a corruption that ran deeper than I knew, a corruption that fed on the men and women who are this harbor." He paused. "Effective as of about 3 minutes ago, the Vassallo Group, as you know it, is dissolved." A collective gasp. I gripped my own hands to stop them from shaking. I didn't know this. He hadn't told me. "The business of shadows is over," he said. "All assets, all of them tied to those activities, are being transferred. They will form the new Harbor Victims Compensation Fund to be administered by an independent third party for the families of workers lost, for the businesses extorted, for the people the harbor failed." The silence was absolute. The city councilmen were as white as ghosts. "But the work continues," Dario said. "The shipping, the logistics, the cranes, the legitimate heart of the harbor. That heart now belongs to you." He pointed to the workers. "Those assets are being restructured into the Harbor Light Cooperative, a new entity, owned and managed by the workers themselves." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a surrender. This was a revolution. "And finally," he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "this new cooperative and myself will be operating under a new harbor security compact. We are voluntarily placing ourselves under the full civil oversight of the Metropolitan Security Commission, Agent Feld and her team will have access to every manifest, every account. The books will be open. The shadows are gone. The crowd erupted. The workers, they were cheering. They were roaring. They weren't just saved, they were empowered. Dario had taken the board, the entire game, and flipped it over. The enemies, the politicians, the rivals, they had no one left to attack. The criminal they'd built their careers on had just vanished. Dario wasn't done. He looked at the cameras, and his gaze seemed to find mine. "Ansel Crow," he said, and the name dropped like a stone. He was the architect of this sickness. He used my name to build an empire of corruption. He funded the North Harbor Union. He bribed politicians. He even, under the guise of donations, compromised federal agents. He did this by hiding the money that was supposed to go back to this city. He held up a file. The Harbor Heart Fund, a legitimate, fully funded community outreach program that Ansel Crow buried. As the first official act of the new cooperative, that fund has been fully restored. As of yesterday, it has paid the entire outstanding medical debt for every longshoreman's family, and it has cleared the full surgical backlog at County General Hospital. My knees buckled. I grabbed the podium. He'd done that from my apartment while I was making oatmeal. Dario looked right at me, his voice softening. "For me alone. Your mother's surgery. Mara is scheduled for Friday. The best heart surgeon in the state has been flown in. It's all taken care of, legally, the way it should have been." Tears, hot and blinding, streamed down my face. I'd been fighting for survival, and he'd been fighting for my life. And that's when I saw him. Ansel. He wasn't running, he was here. He was in the back of the crowd, disguised as a news cameraman. He had lost. He had been outmaneuvered. His name was ruined. His assets were frozen. He had nothing left. And he was looking right at me. He saw the tears. He saw me as the cause, the waitress, the one who had ruined $1 billion plan. He raised his camera, but it wasn't a camera, it was a gun, a long-barreled pistol, nested in the shell of the broadcast equipment. He was aiming at me. Time slowed down. I saw the dark, round hole of the barrel. I saw the fury in his eyes. I couldn't move. But the sun, that weak, gray, morning sun, broke through the clouds for just 1 second. It hit the piece of brass at my throat, my father's compass. It flashed, a brilliant, sharp glint of pure, reflected light. It flashed directly into Ansel's eyes. He flinched, he squinted, his aim thrown off for a vital half-second. I didn't even see Dario move. He was a blur. He wasn't a businessman. He wasn't a boss. He was a shield. He roared my name, and in the next instant he was airborne, his body crashing into mine, his arms, his wounded arms, wrapped around me as he threw us both to the unforgiving wooden planks of the pier. A single gunshot cracked through the air. It wasn't Ansel's. It was Yara's. She was standing on the podium, her gun held in a two-handed grip, smoke rising from the barrel. She hadn't hesitated. Ansel crumpled. He wasn't dead. Yara was too good for that. The gun clattered from his useless, shattered hand. The real MSC agents, her loyal team, swarmed him, burying him in a pile of black tactical gear. The crowd screamed. It was over. It was finally, truly over. Dario was on top of me, his heart hammering against my chest. "Are you hit?" he gasped, his hands frantically checking my face, my arms. "Mara, are you hit?" "No," I cried, clinging to him. "Are you your shoulder?" "I'm fine." He rolled off me and stood up, wincing. He looked at Ansel, who was being cuffed, screaming obscenities, a broken, defeated man. Dario didn't walk over. He didn't gloat. He just looked at him, and his voice was cold and clear, for all the world to hear. "It's over, Ansel," he said. "You only win when I shoot back. I win when I change the rules of the game." The rest was a blur. The politicians were scrambling, the North Harbor Union, their leadership arrested in the aquarium, their funds frozen, their political cover gone, they just evaporated. Yara Feld was giving a statement, a new partnership, a new day for Baltimore. The sun was warm. The harbor was quiet. For the first time, there were no sirens, no alarms, just the sound of the gulls in the water. Dario turned to me. He ignored the cameras. He ignored his lawyers, and Yara, and the cheering workers. He walked to me, his face streaked with grime, his shirt stained with blood, his and mine. "You saved me, Mara," he said, his voice thick, "just for me. You ran out into the rain and saved me from the bullets. You pulled me from the water and saved me from the fire. And you stood by me, and you saved me from myself." My hand was over my mouth, the tears still coming. And then, in front of the entire city, in front of the cameras that were now all trained on us, this king, this ghost, this wolf of the harbor went down on one knee. A collective, single gasp rose from the crowd. "Dario," I whispered. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He didn't pull out a phone. He pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was perfect. It was a simple, dark, brushed band made from what looked like reclaimed anchor steel, and in the center, not faceted, but smooth and polished, was a single, deep, sea-green stone. "I can't promise you a quiet life," he said, his voice raw. "I can't promise you peace, but I can promise you my life. I can promise you I will always, always stand between you and the wind." He looked up at me, the most dangerous man in the city, on one knee, completely vulnerable. "You're the co-owner of this new harbor. Mara Quinn, will you be the co-owner of my life? Too, will you marry me?" I couldn't speak. I was choking on the tears, on the joy. I just nodded. Yes, yes, yes. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was cold and heavy. It was the most real thing I'd ever felt. He stood, and he pulled me into his arms, and he kissed me, and the entire harbor erupted. The foghorns of the tugboats, the cheers of the longshoremen, the applause. Even Yara, I saw her. She was actually smiling. I looked over his shoulder. The Harbor Light Cafe. My cafe. Someone had already hung a new, hand-painted wooden sign in the window, right next to the bullet hole. "Harbor Light Cafe, a workers' cooperative." I saw the workers, my friends, lining up, holding papers, not paychecks, shares. I pulled back and looked at him. My king. I touched the brass compass at my throat, then I looked at my hand, at the sea-green stone. I laid my hand over his, the one I had bandaged, and his fingers interlaced with mine. Solid, safe. This was peace. Not the easy kind, the harbor kind, the kind that was built to handle the wind. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. It means the world to us. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video. And if you really want to support us, hit that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.